My name is Rowan Hale, 34 years old. Stable looks good on paper. Systems analyst, decent money. A one-bedroom in Durham with a fig tree that refuses to die and a car I finished paying off 2 summers ago. No kids. Never married. No debt dragging at my ankles. If you squint, it reads like freedom. In my family, though, it reads like obligation, like a blank check waiting for the right sob story. We don't say that out loud, of course. We say family steps up, and then certain people point at me when the bill arrives. The text came on a Tuesday, brash as a salesman shoulder-tapping you at the gas pump. From Dennis, my older brother, collector of half-finished jobs and fully finished excuses. No greeting, no, how are you? Just, cover my son's college. Dorm plus laptop plus meal plan $15,000. Need it before December ends. I smiled at the math symbol, like the problem would solve itself if he dressed it up. I typed back, not happening, and waited for the storm that didn't arrive. Silence for 3 days is its own kind of weather. News travels stupidly fast in small ecosystems. A friend of mine, Jenna, works at the same gym my dad goes to. She texted me after a morning shift. Overheard your dad laughing with Dennis by the water fountain. Dennis said, "Don't worry, after Christmas dinner, she'll pay." Dad nodded like a foreman approving a delivery. That's her role. The words hung in my chest all afternoon, heavy as wet wool. My role. There it was, printed without ink. I was the family's walking wallet with a polite face. I didn't reply to anyone. I opened a different window instead, the one where decisions live. Credit card portal first. I removed Dennis as an authorized user with 2 clicks and a confirmation email that felt like a breath finally exhaled. Insurance next. The Camry he'd been driving under my policy, because rates are better with you, sis, vanished from my plan with a hold music crescendo and a scripted apology I didn't need. Grace period ends January 1st. The agent said brightly, as if she were inviting me to a party. I jotted the date in my notes. I don't keep a diary. I keep a ledger. Screenshots of transfers, rent I've floated, the AC unit I replaced at my parents' last summer, a tally of I owe you texts that never turned into repayment. I title the folder Justifications, not for a courtroom, for my future self, so I won't forget what actually happened when someone starts revising the scene. December spun toward its inevitable dinner, all pine candles and unearned cheer. I said yes to the invite, offered to bring dessert, bought a tin of buttery cookies from the nice shop downtown because the small things should still be good. The house smelled like garlic and old carpet. Dennis was unusually buoyant, tossing jokes like small change and clapping Caleb, his 18-year-old, on the shoulder as if he'd built the boy with his bare hands. Caleb hugged me at the door, his chin higher than the last time I saw him, eyes tired but still kind. He doesn't lean on me. He doesn't need to. That's probably why I like him. We gathered at the table. Mom poured discount wine into cloudy stemware and declared it festive. Dad raised his glass. To family. He added, after the pause he uses to turn a toast into a judgment, to generosity. Candles threw lazy light across the gravy boat. A cousin I barely tolerate angled her phone like she was framing a candid and not a receipt. Amanda, Dennis's wife, smoothed her daughter's hair and didn't meet my eyes. About Caleb, Dennis said, leaning back like a man about to receive a performance bonus he hadn't earned. His voice turned solemn on the name, as if the weight of fatherhood had suddenly found him at the head of the table. We just want what's best for him. So do I wanted to say, which is why I won't sponsor your refusal to grow up. I set my fork down and pulled an envelope from my bag. Heavy, cream, neat. He opened it quick, a magician who believes every hat contains a rabbit. His brows dipped. He unfolded the single sheet of paper and read, lips flattening. This year, I'm giving gifts only to those who don't expect them. I'm also reclaiming what's mine. The car, the card, the control. Merry Christmas. He laughed first, a bark with no humor. What the hell is this? Mom looked from him to me, her face arranged in a puzzle she had no intention of solving. Dad's jaw tightened, hand white around his glass. I stayed seated. Your access to my card ended last week, I said. Your insurance coverage ends in 6 days. Caleb can still go to college. You can figure it out like every other parent. The room changed shape. Sound sharpened. The squeal of a chair leg, the whisper of someone's sleeve. Dennis stood so fast his napkin fell like a surrender flag. "You've always done this," he snapped. "Held money over our heads like you're better than us." "I've always paid this bill you slid under the door," I said, still calm. "Those are different things." He looked to Dad, a flicker, the same tick he's had since we were kids, and he needed a backup chorus. Dad didn't speak. Mom did, her voice soft and lethal as a fillet knife. "Rowan," she said, scolding a child in a supermarket aisle, "don't make a scene." There's a strange peace that settles when you decide not to audition for a role you never accepted. I folded my hands in my lap. I missed a scene. "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm changing a pattern." Across the table, Caleb watched me like the end of a movie he didn't want spoiled. His gaze slid to his father and back again. Something in it made my chest hurt. Glenn, our stepdad, cleared his throat with the theatricality of a man who has never read a room. "It's Christmas," he said, as if the calendar itself were a moral argument. "And I'm giving a gift," I said. "It just isn't the one you rehearsed." Amanda made a small sound that could have been shock or a laugh she didn't finish. A cousin's phone hovered again, then dropped. I saw the screen, the tiny red light, wondered absently which version of me would appear on her story before morning. Dad finally spoke, each word a nail. "After everything we've done for you," he said. I stared at the tablecloth, white with a faint gravy stain nobody had bothered to rinse, and thought about the gym fountain, the nod, that sentence. That's her role. I pressed my napkin flat with one finger, then set it on my plate. "Dinner was lovely," I said, and meant only the cookies. Outside, night pressed its nose to the windows. Inside, heat and disapproval gathered in corners. I didn't apologize. I didn't escalate. I stood, thanked my mother for cooking, kissed Caleb on the forehead because he didn't flinch when I reached for him, and left my envelope for Dennis like a mirror he could avoid looking in for a while. Back home, I put the uneaten cookies on my counter and opened the laptop that knows me better than most people. The credit card portal winked awake and showed me what I already knew. No authorized users. Insurance. Confirm changes. A small green check sat next to every line that mattered to my sanity. I took a screenshot and slid it into justifications. Evidence of a boundary is still a boundary when you forget how to hold it. Sleep resisted, then arrived in a series of small defeats. I woke at 3 to the furnace clicking and the building sighing. On the ceiling, passing headlights carved bright shapes and moved on. I replayed the table, the toast, the envelope, the rage, the way Mom's silence felt like agreement and not neutrality, the way Dad's eyes had already moved to January. Somewhere between the replay and the next hour, I saw something I'd missed. When Dennis read the note, his face didn't just flush with anger. For a second, it went pale, the color of a man who realizes a ladder has been pulled and the ground is much farther than he thought. Fear changes voices. I'm not cruel enough to enjoy it. I am honest enough to admit I recognized it. I've lived under it for years. The fear that if I don't step in, everything collapses. The fear is real. That's why they gave it to me to carry. I set my phone face down on the nightstand. It buzzed, then stopped, then buzzed again. I didn't check the names. Morning is a better time to read accusations. You can drink coffee while they try to turn you into a villain. I breathed in 4 counts, out 6, the way a therapist once coached me in a hallway between meetings when I thought I was going to cry at a copier. Calm isn't a gift. It's a muscle you build when you're tired of being yanked around. When dawn finally pulled a blue seam across the blinds, I got up and made the kind of breakfast nobody comments on. Toast with butter, an egg with a yolk that didn't break, the last of the good jam. On the table, I laid out the envelope's twin, the one I'd written and decided not to use unless provoked. I didn't need it. The decision was enough. On the counter, my laptop still glowed. Auto pay, none scheduled. Authorized users, none listed. Insurance, policy change pending. Effective January 1st. The language of systems is bland, but the meaning can still be electric. I let the screen go to sleep. The room kept its own light. Somewhere, a cousin was uploading a story with a caption that made me 2 inches tall. Somewhere, Dennis was pacing and drafting a speech that would make him sound like a father instead of a man with a calculator. Somewhere, Dad was nodding again. Somewhere, Caleb was staring at a ceiling he didn't deserve. In here, a fig tree leaned toward a winter window, and the world didn't end because I refused to subsidize its worst habits. You change a pattern the way you break a code, one character at a time, careful, certain. At the table last night, they expected a performance. I gave them a policy change. The confirmation sat there in the dark like a verdict only I needed to witness. I left them, one small lighthouse rectangle on a quiet desk, and went to work. The morning after Christmas, my phone vibrated itself off the nightstand. 15 missed calls, 7 from Mom, 4 from Dennis, the rest scattered between cousins who normally forgot I existed. By noon, the family group chat lit up like a bonfire. Lines stacked faster than I could read them. You traumatized Caleb. You embarrassed your father. You've always been cold. From Glenn. So what? You gonna ruin a kid's future because your feelings got hurt? Grow up. Dennis didn't bother with subtlety. Variations of, you'll regret this, you crossed the line, you owe us. He used owe like it was a birthright. My dad, not one message, which somehow felt worse. By evening, the circle widened. A cousin posted on Facebook. It's always the ones with no family of their own who try to ruin everyone else's. She didn't tag me. She didn't need to. People shared it anyway, and by the time I dragged myself to the grocery store the next day, the gossip had legs. June, one of Mom's church friends, cornered me near the freezer aisle. She leaned in, voice low and sugary. You doing okay? After everything that came out about you and that married man at work? I blinked. What married man? She flinched, muttered something, and pushed her cart away so fast a bag of peas fell out. By the time I made it to my car, I knew. It wasn't enough for them to paint me selfish. They had to paint me dirty. That night, I opened the justifications folder, dragged in screenshots of the chat, and added a new tab to the spreadsheet I'd been keeping for 6 months. Every loan to Dennis, every rent check I covered for my parents, every time I paid for groceries or utilities without being asked, because no one else would. The total blinked back at me, $47,312. I didn't print it to demand repayment. I printed it to remind myself why I was done. Paper doesn't lie, even if families do. I started making moves in silence, left the group chat, blocked Dennis, blocked Mom, blocked Dad. Blocked Dad. I pulled up apartment listings in Seattle, emailed a realtor, scouted neighborhoods with Jenna, the only person I trusted enough to tell. There was an opening at my company's West Coast office, same role, better pay. I sent in the request. No social posts, no hint to the family. If they thought I was stewing, good. I wasn't. I was plotting my escape. And then, like they could smell freedom on me, Mom showed up. A knock at my condo door on a Thursday evening. No text, no warning, just her silhouette through frosted glass, holding a plastic container of lasagna like it was a peace treaty. I let her in out of curiosity, not forgiveness. She set the container on my coffee table and perched on the couch like she owned it. 10 minutes of small talk. Weather, church, how Caleb was struggling with all the drama. She smiled like she hadn't spent the past week watching them turn me into a public villain. Then she dropped it. We know you're moving. I didn't flinch, just waited. We just want to understand why you're not thinking clearly, Rowan. You're making rash choices. Dennis says you've been lonely, angry, maybe confused. Confused, I repeated, tasting the word. She nodded with a soft, pitying smile. You don't need to run away across the country to feel better. You need to be with your family, with people who care about you. That's when she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, slid it across the table like a dealer, a power of attorney form. Dennis had filled in the blanks, giving him authority to manage my accounts in the event of emotional distress or impaired judgment. The description section used words like erratic behavior, financial hostility, abandonment of familial duties. And there at the bottom, my father's shaky signature as witness. The air left my lungs. You've got to be kidding me. Mom's voice sharpened. We just want to protect you before you do something you can't take back. Protect me, I said, by taking my money before I can move it. Her mouth tightened. Dennis is just trying to help. No, Dennis is trying to own me. I stood, pointed at the door. Leave now, before I call the police. For a moment, she hesitated, eyes narrowing, like she was weighing whether I meant it. Then she gathered her purse, muttered something about me being ungrateful, and left. As soon as the latch clicked, I shredded the form into confetti, dropped it into the trash, and sat on the floor, staring at the pieces. My family hadn't just tried to guilt me anymore. They'd tried to trap me. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the building felt like footsteps outside my door. So I accelerated everything. The next morning, I confirmed the transfer with HR, booked a one-way ticket, paid 3 months up front to break my lease, hired movers, scheduled my car for shipment instead of driving it cross-country. I even adjusted my flight to leave 3 days earlier than anyone could guess. But paranoia doesn't ask for permission. That Friday, a sedan I didn't recognize parked across from my condo, stayed an hour, left. Saturday, another car, different plates, same model. Then, 2 days before my movers were scheduled, someone tried to get into my building using my name. The front desk stopped him. He claimed he was my brother. Dennis. I filed a restraining order the next morning. My lawyer warned it might not stick, but it was a start. The night before my flight, I packed only what I could carry in 2 suitcases. Everything else would follow later. I stood in the quiet condo, lasagna still untouched on the counter, and realized they weren't just afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing their ATM. At 4 a.m., the cab pulled up. I wheeled my suitcases down the hall, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. By the time the sun rose over the tarmac, I was already buckled in, phone set to airplane mode. 2 time zones away, my family still thought I was 3 days from leaving. And for once, they were wrong. Seattle greeted me with gray skies and the smell of wet pavement. The taxi ride from the airport was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you realize how much noise you've been carrying. My new 1-bedroom sat just outside the city, a modest complex with trimmed hedges and a view of power lines that cut the sky into pieces. For the first time in my adult life, I unlocked a door, knowing no one else had a copy of the key. The first morning was strange. No buzzing phone, no group chat dings, no passive-aggressive requests disguised as checking in. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of a leaky faucet. I made coffee, drank it hot, and almost cried from the sheer ordinary peace of it. But peace, when you've never had it, can feel like a setup. I told myself I was free. Then the shadows followed me. A week into the move, HR called me in. Anonymous complaint. Someone had reported through the ethics hotline that I had fled North Carolina because of an affair with a married manager, that I'd created a hostile environment and transferred before an internal investigation could finish. I didn't need to guess who planted it. The wording was almost a carbon copy of the Facebook gossip that had sprouted weeks earlier. The investigation took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of interviews, of explaining that no, there was no affair, no scandal, no running from anything except a family that wanted to own me. 2 weeks of side glances from colleagues who didn't know me yet, who might have believed the whispers even when HR eventually cleared me. After they closed the file, my manager gave me a kind smile, but the damage was done. A rumor leaves fingerprints long after the crime scene is dusted. I started therapy. Jenna, my one trusted friend, urged me not to wait. The therapist was blunt. Your family assigned you the role of caretaker, of provider, and when you stopped playing, they called it betrayal. She leaned forward. You're not confused, Rowan. You're just uncast. That feels like chaos, but it's freedom. I wanted to believe her, but then came the letter. Forwarded from my old address, no return name. I unfolded it at my new kitchen table. My father's handwriting sprawled across the page, shaky but deliberate. The family has decided you are no longer welcome. You've broken our trust. You abandoned Caleb. You embarrassed us with your unstable behavior. Do not return. You are no longer one of us. I read it once, twice, until the words blurred. My father, who nodded while Dennis called me a roll, who signed that power of attorney form, like it was a birthday card, had written me off like a subscription he was tired of paying for. Oddly, it snapped something in me. The fear that had chased me across states fell quiet. If they could exile me so easily, then maybe I had been free all along. I started hiking on weekends, alone at first. Trails damp with pine needles, gulls crying overhead, the city skyline peeking through evergreens. Each step felt like proof I could carry my own weight without dragging theirs. I joined coworkers for dinner, laughed at jokes without scanning the bill, let silence at night feel like peace instead of punishment. 6 months passed in inches. Then, one evening, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since Christmas. Caleb. The message was short. They want to see you, just for a few days. They said they're sorry. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I typed back, "Is this you, or are they telling you to say that?" His reply came almost instantly. It's me. They asked, but I wouldn't send it if I didn't mean it. I know you don't believe them, but maybe you should come. If not for them, then to say what you need to say. For 2 weeks, I let the message sit like a stone in my pocket. I told myself it was a trick, another ploy. But Caleb had always been different. He was a kid born into a script he didn't write. Eventually, I booked a flight. 3 days. Hotel downtown. No fanfare. Not for them. For him. We met at a coffee shop the morning after I landed. He looked older, tired, his shoulders carrying weight no 18-year-old should. We talked about college applications, about how he felt stuck between loyalty and truth, about how sometimes he missed the family he thought he had. He didn't push me to see the others, but when I asked what made them change their minds, he hesitated. They didn't, he admitted. They just want the money back. But I think you should still come. Say what you really want to say. That was the most honest answer I could have hoped for. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. The siding looked more brittle, the yard patchy, where Dad used to boast about his lawn. I didn't knock. I walked in like I had as a kid, back when I still thought I belonged. They were waiting. Dad, Mom, Dennis, even Amanda. Caleb leaned against the hallway wall, arms crossed, watching. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Dennis stood, folder in hand, like he was chairing a meeting. Thanks for coming, he said. Dad cleared his throat. We've had time to reflect. Things got out of hand. Mom added quickly, families fight, but we can fix this. I looked at Caleb. His face told me nothing. Dennis slid the folder across the table. I opened it. The title at the top read, Voluntary Family Contribution Agreement. Inside, a breakdown of specific amounts, annual contributions to Caleb's education, to family emergencies, to household support. A minimum of $22,000 per year. I looked at each of them in turn. Their faces were steady. They thought this was reconciliation. I closed the folder, slid it back, and asked only one question. Caleb, did you know about this? He shook his head. I swear I didn't. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked out without another word. Behind me, the silence finally cracked. Dennis sputtering, Mom calling my name, Dad muttering something about respect. But I was already in the car, already heading back to the hotel, already booking an earlier flight on my phone. That night, before sleep, my phone buzzed one more time, a text from Dennis. Nice seeing you. Don't worry. I'll tell everyone what really happened between you and that VP in Seattle. Bet they'd love to hear it. I blocked him. I didn't cry on the plane the next morning. I didn't feel anything until I landed, until I opened my laptop, until I uploaded every piece of evidence I'd been saving for months. The power of attorney, the smear complaints, my father's exile letter, and now, the contribution contract. I typed one sentence to my lawyer. I want nothing tying me to them ever again. The reply from my lawyer came back in less than an hour. Understood. Proceeding with comprehensive protections and notices. The words looked sterile on the screen, but they landed like a gavel. I closed the laptop and let the silence of my Seattle apartment seep into me. For once, silence wasn't punishment. It was protection. I spent the next week gathering every scrap of evidence I'd saved. Screenshots of texts, the fake power of attorney Dennis tried to slip through Mom, the anonymous HR complaint that nearly sank me at work, the letter where Dad disowned me. And now the glossy folder of their so-called voluntary family contribution agreement. Each one, a stone in the wall I was building between myself and them. Jenna came by that weekend with takeout and 2 bottles of wine. She sat on my couch while I spread the papers across the coffee table. It's like they were building a case, she muttered, flipping through the stack. They were, I said, against me, against my right to not bankroll their lives. She studied me for a long moment. So now you're building your own. Exactly. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even justice. It was insurance. Proof for the day I might start doubting my own memory, when their voices in my head would tell me I was exaggerating. Paper doesn't gaslight you. Work helped me steady myself. The HR complaint had fizzled out, but I doubled down anyway. Projects finished early. Clients happy. By March, my manager called me into his office. Promotion, he said simply, sliding a folder across his desk. New responsibilities, higher pay, a team of my own. I signed the papers with hands that didn't shake. The irony hit me later that night. While my family had been plotting how to siphon money from me, the company I'd moved across the country for was handing me more. Not because I was blood, not because I owed them, but because I'd earned it. I started dating, cautiously. A man named Eli, quiet, kind, with a way of listening that didn't feel like surveillance. I told him the whole story early: Christmas, the contract, the smear campaigns. I braced for the look, the pity, or disbelief. He just nodded and said, "That sounds exhausting. No wonder you left." And then he asked if I wanted to split dessert. That was it. No judgment, just a fork. For the first time, intimacy didn't feel like a negotiation. But even as life began to take shape, the echoes lingered. Some nights, I'd wake to the phantom buzz of my phone, expecting another barrage of threats. Some mornings, I'd scroll too far and see an old cousin's post about loyalty and feel my throat close. Trauma doesn't vanish. It dulls, like a bruise you stop pressing. So I turned discipline into armor. Weekly therapy. Evening walks by the sound, the skyline fractured in water. I bought a small safe, locked the evidence folder inside. A ritual, paper stacked neatly, sealed, shut away. Not forgotten, just contained. 6 months later, Dennis broke the silence with one last attempt, an email, short, smug. "Hope you're enjoying Seattle. Guess what? Caleb's tuition bill just came in. Still waiting on that check." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My lawyer did. 3 sentences that might as well have been engraved. Cease contact. Any further attempts will be treated as harassment. This matter is closed. The silence that followed was different this time. Not heavy, not ominous, just gone. I celebrated by walking into a jewelry store and buying myself a pair of earrings. Not pawn shop pearls, not costume metal, something in between. Sterling hoops, simple, solid. They weren't about fashion. They were about ownership. My father's last gift had been twisted into a weapon against me. These were mine, chosen for no one else's approval. One evening, as I clicked off the lamp on my desk, I realized the balance had shifted. Before, boundaries had felt like battle lines, something I had to defend daily. Now, they felt like infrastructure, quiet, reliable, built into the foundation of my life. I wasn't waiting for them to break in. I was living in a house they couldn't touch. Late summer arrived with an email I almost ignored. The sender address looked unfamiliar, but the subject line read simply, "It's Caleb." My finger hovered over delete before curiosity won. The message was long. He wrote that Dennis had finally been forced to get a real job once my money dried up, that Mom had gotten sick earlier in the year. Not terminal, but enough to shake the illusion of invincibility. He said the house felt different now, heavier, quieter. Then, at the end, "I think they're ready to admit they treated you horribly. They asked me to reach out. They want you to come back, just for a few days. Not to fix anything, just to say they're sorry." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My family had never apologized. They didn't say sorry. They said, "You misunderstood." They said, "Family fights." They said, "Don't make a scene," but never sorry. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one handwritten, the shaky loops of Mom's script instantly familiar. She admitted she'd believed Dennis because it was easier than admitting how badly they'd used me. She confessed she let me become the strong one because it spared her from facing her own weakness. And at the end, "You were the strong one, Rowan. That's why we used you. I hate that it took losing you to see it." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired, but something in me softened. 2 weeks later, I booked a flight back to North Carolina. I didn't tell anyone except Caleb. I stayed at a hotel near downtown, didn't share my room number. When I pulled up to the old house, the siding looked duller, the yard unkempt. Caleb opened the door. He didn't smile, didn't hug, just nodded and stepped aside. Inside, it was heavier than I remembered. Not cleaner, not warmer, just weighted with years of things unspoken. Dennis sat in the living room, eyes bloodshot but steady. Amanda hovered near him, silent. Mom shuffled in from the kitchen, smaller than I'd ever seen her. Dad sat in his recliner, hands folded like he was preparing for confession. No one spoke. Then Dennis broke the silence. "You were right, about all of it." His voice cracked. No qualifiers, no excuses, just that. Mom's eyes filled, and she whispered, "I'm sorry for letting it happen, for not stopping it." I didn't rush to answer, I just listened. Later, Dad pulled me aside near the hallway. His voice was gravel. You don't owe us anything, but we owe you the truth. I'm sorry. I stayed 3 days. There were no contracts, no requests for checks, no sudden pivots back to guilt. Conversation was clumsy, but it was real. At night, I lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if this counted as healing or just a temporary ceasefire. On the last evening, Caleb walked me to the car. I hope you come back again, he said quietly. But even if you don't, I'm glad you came this time. I drove to the hotel in silence. For the first time since Christmas, I cried. Not out of rage, not out of grief, just release. Back in Seattle, I let the distance grow again. Phone calls here and there, letters from Caleb, honest and simple. I never rejoined the group chat, never gave them my bank routing number. Boundaries held. And one night, sitting by my window while the rain tapped against the glass, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't need them to be different. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy for walking away. The power they once had over me, gone. The spreadsheet I'd built with every dollar spent, every receipt saved, archived, not erased. Proof for a past I no longer lived in. The lamp beside me glowed on a timer, steady and warm. Not because I was the one keeping the lights on for everyone else, because I'd finally learned to keep them on for myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing peace. I was living it.